Hello, everyone. Hello, Andy. It's such an honor to have you. Hello, Sharon.
Hello, Mira. Hello, Andy. Such an honor to
Yeah.
have you, as Mira said. Yes, we're thrilled.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the invite for coming. I'm absolutely delighted to talk with you and have a wonderful talk.
When I think about how much you have done for the world of past life regression, honestly, my mind is blown. Back when you
Oh,
started training other people, I was just still a baby coming out of law school, and I had to go through one
oh,
career to get to, doing past life regressions. And yet you were years ahead, paving the way, teaching others, changing the world. So I would love to hear how it all started for you.
well, you say that, but that's exactly how I was feeling about 25 years ago when I came across Roger Wolgar, who was one of the early pioneers in this whole area of past life work. And I just come out of corporate. I used to work in the computer industry. So I was a little new to therapy. I'd done a psychology degree and I'd done training in as a psychotherapist, but I felt that there was something really missing. And then I came across Roger and the wonderful work that he did. And I thought just that is, wow, he spent 25 years of his life before that building up so many different aspects, not only of working with past lives, but he did a lot of work with trauma by bringing in the body and clearing quite deep issues with that. And I thought, I just really want to learn everything he's done. And so I was delighted to be able to spend time with him and keep alive a lot of the wonderful things that he'd done and bring it into and integrate it with some of the other pioneers as well, because I believe an important part of the work we can do is to acknowledge the pioneers and thank them for what they've done, but perhaps add a little something to it, and then all of us can do that. And I know there's students of mine who've taken my work and they're adding things to it. And this is a natural way in which things evolve and develop.
Most definitely.
So I'd read books by Roger Wolgar, and at the time, all of his training was in the States, and I lived in the UK. And then I got this invite to come through to one of Roger Wolgar's workshops. It was a 2-day one. And it turned out to be about half an hour from where I lived. I thought, oh, wow, that's a coincidence, isn't it? That was before I learned about synchronicity. And when I went, I realized this is a sort of work I want to do. And I've been quite fascinated by it. And it did actually remind me of something that happened while I was still in corporate when I went to see a medium. And this medium was... really got my attention because the first thing they said to me was, you never enjoyed playing rugby at school, did you? Now, when I was younger, for some reason, I kept being picked for the first team. I mean, in the UK, rugby is a little bit like American
Football.
American football without all of the padding and things like
Right.
that. And they play in winter, and in winter, the ground gets covered in freezing, whatever, and it's cold. And I used to say to myself, oh, I hope they don't pick me. And for some reason, they keep picking me. And I used to try to not do as well as I should do, but that didn't seem to make any difference. But I never told anyone. And I thought, wow, how did he know that? Because I wasn't thinking about it. And then he said, you're going to be doing something with people laying down, and cathars are going to be significant in your life. Now, I had no idea what cathars were, but I later discovered that the cathars were a religious sect in southern France who believed in reincarnation. And of course, there's the reincarnation link. And of course, when I work with clients, they do lay down. I mean, at that time, I thought clients always sat down in a chair like counseling. So, so obviously there was aspects of my work that must have been planned, and they were just priming me, as the spirit realms tend to do, just to get me ready to start on this path.
Did you have any personal, really meaningful experiences that shook you up? Anything that really made you say, okay, I want to invest in this?
I think it was really just how deep some of these experiences were going. I mean, for example, one of my colleagues as a student, when I did the like a 2-day introduction, she'd had very, very deep personal issues where she'd been abused. We later discovered she'd abused by a father, but we didn't know that. And she did a lot of self-harm and very dysfunctional behaviors. And Roger took her into a past life where she was covered in rocks. And of course, because he uses a lot of body therapy, she was pushing the rocks away, and there was a big catharsis, which is always very, very dramatic when you're watching it as a student. And then she slipped into her current life, and instead of there being rocks on her, it was a father who was abusing her, and she was pushing him off. And when people are able to transform deep trauma with the body, it can really shift things so enormously fast. And because it's so visual, and because of the depth of the emotions that were involved, it was a really lasting experience that I didn't forget. And of course, since then, I've had lots and lots of my own as I've been teaching my students. But yeah, so I guess that was probably it, which is so different than the psychotherapies that I'd previously been taught, which were very gentle, tending to avoid catharsis. And I thought, well, you know, because there's this spiritual dimension where people can get an overview about why this particular issue had happened, and ways of transforming it and finding forgiveness, and also be able to work at deep trauma as well, then this is what I want to do. So I went through all of Roger's training, took it on board, and then integrated it with some of the other pioneers like Bradshaw and his inner child work, and Milton Erickson and his amazing work with hypnosis, and not forgetting either Michael Newton and his amazing contribution with Between Lives. All of them really major pioneers. And my skill really has been bringing them together. And because I'd had quite a number of years in corporate as a freelance trainer teaching, that I developed quite a lot of skills in teaching. So I came up with ways of being able to teach this, where some of my predecessors were very skilled as therapists, but they hadn't really been through and being taught as trainers. So I was able to integrate that, plus bringing together the best of them. And then I did a lot of work with my colleagues in establishing standards, because I've really been a big believer in the standards. You know, for example, you know, if you're going for an operation, you expect the surgeon to be a certain standard. You don't think, hang on, let me see your qualifications, what association you belong to. You just, if they're saying they're a surgeon and they can do an operation, you expect them to have that standard. So we were trying to, with my colleagues, we've been trying to do the same in the world of past life and regression therapy. And we've been very successful. I work with the International Board of Regression Therapy, and they've pioneered the work with qualifying past life therapists, and with particularly with Amsterdam and a lot of my colleagues in Europe. We've created an international standard for regression therapy, which is integrates past life, current life, and deeper trauma work as well. So so this is really important, and hopefully it's preparing the way for the big shift, so that we have new ways of working that is open to anybody to join, you know, and they can, through their schools or whatever, they're encouraged to meet those standards.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It gives the patient or the client more, they could trust more, can trust the
Yes,
more.
we can do, because particularly in the world of past lives, there are so many schools around that are just literally allow people to watch a few videos, give a certificate, and then say, there you go. And of course, it's fine if they're doing past life tourism of just taking someone in and experience a bit of a past life. But if you're working therapeutically, then you really need to have a completely different set of skills. And this is what I've been doing with my colleagues, trying to create these standards.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that.
I've also been very busy with the medical profession as well, because one of the things that I felt quite disappointed about is that there's so few medical doctors embracing it. You know, we've had Brian Weiss, for example, who's done amazing work because he's bridged together his background as a psychiatrist with promoting his experiences with past lives, but so few others. So I helped create an association called SMART. There was about 15 medical doctors who do regression therapy got together. We produced a couple of books and started to establish research working with unexplainable pain. And it's just really started to help bring into the world of the medical profession the work we do. But it is very, very difficult. One of the medical doctors, Peter Mack, I've helped publish 4 of his books, but he's done amazing work by talking to his colleagues. And he said, you know, the only way that they'll really listen to me is when I do a video of a patient saying, this is my problem. Then Peter talks about what he did. And then the person who was the client then says, this is the change I had. They say, oh, well, we'll believe it now. We couldn't possibly believe it otherwise. And then we're going up to him saying, what's this amazing therapy that you've discovered? He said, no, it's not. It's past life therapy. It's regression therapy. You know, there's lots of people around the world that are doing it. So it can be really quite eye-opening for people who all they need is an open mind, you know, that there are things that are different. You know, people can have the specialization as medical doctors, and that's fine. But if they want to switch more to finding the root cause of people's problems rather than dealing with the symptoms, then quite often you have to really take a much more holistic approach.
I would love to. Yeah, I would love to hear some more of your thoughts on trauma. So I've heard people ask, so I have this pain in my leg, so does that mean something happened to my leg in another lifetime? Is it one-to-one like that, right? I have a scar on my shoulder, so I probably got stabbed in my shoulder in another lifetime, or is it more complex?
It's always hard to know when people have physical marks, whether there's a good explanation for it. You know, like, you know, the person who has a scar could very well have had some physical damage, or someone who has a pain, you know, there could be a medical explanation because of arthritis or pulled muscle or something like that. So you have to really do some sort of intuitive check to find out if it's related to a past life. But quite a lot of unexplainable physical pain is related to a past life. I mean, for example, there was one client I had who had the emotion of powerlessness. And she was in a relationship where she was being abused sexually and psychologically by her partner. And she wasn't able to say, stop. You know, and that can happen when people are in this powerless situation, is that they know what's happening, but they just lose the ability to be able to respond to it. And
Yeah.
so she had these pains in her stomach and, you know, in her throat, not being able to talk. And when she regressed, she went initially into a past life in Victorian England, where she'd been born as an orphan, was in an orphanage, and eventually was taken by a rich person, and he started to abuse her. He started to beat her, and she had no money, nowhere to go to. She said, no one will believe me because here's me, a poor person, and there's this rich person in Victorian England who was seen as a pillar of society. So she just had to take all these beatings, and eventually she died being beaten, and part of where she was beaten was around the stomach area. And again, she was unable to speak her truth. And the way this works, as you know, with your own work, is something that's not completed in a past life gets recreated in the next life. It's like for the soul, it's like there's something it needs to learn. It needs to be able to work through an issue. Yeah. And in this case, it's been able to stand up to someone who's abusing her. So she ended up in this life, in a current life, with having parents abused her. And then she married the present partner that she had, who was abusing her as well. She had this whole cycle of abuse, which is probably about the hardest thing you can do to be able to break out of something that's just ongoing. You know, if you just have like a single event, it's often easier to clear. But when you've had a whole series of them ever since early childhood, it's incredibly hard to break through this. So we started with the past life, and with the body therapy, she was able to push him away and stop the kicking that she was getting. And then in a later session, she worked with the current life. And when she was being abused, she was able to push away the abuser and just feel the transformation and the power that she could have within her. And eventually, she could practice saying the words, you know, get off me, go away, or whatever it is, just to get the energy flowing through her throat. And then she was able to stand up to her current partner and say, look, either treat me well or I leave. And it got resolved. I think he left, but I mean, it could have been either way around. And she'd work as a soul, she'd work through the life lesson. But the body therapy was quite important for that type of problem. There's a lot of issues where body therapy isn't needed, but often when there's physical pain, then working with the body is quite important. And again, I was just borrowing the techniques that were developed by Roger, and then similar ones are now being done in the world of psychiatry. Bessel van der Kerk in the Boston Trauma Center do a lot of work with the body as well. They do it slightly differently, a much more gentle approach, but nevertheless, they are starting to bring an awareness into the medical world that dealing with deeper things, deeper trauma, does involve some aspect of the body. But they haven't quite developed into past life work, which is so helpful. And particularly in this case, because sometimes people can work with past lives and it's easier for people to find forgiveness or to complete them in past lives than the current life. Sometimes the emotions can be so raw or difficult. So past lives are a great way for people to slowly start healing themselves and developing transformational skills before they're able to bring it into their current life.
What you shared is really very important. And also, I would love to hear your thoughts so that our listeners can hear this very clearly, because they'll be wondering for themselves, what completes a learning lesson? What completes a lesson in a cycle? What stops the reincarnation with the same issue over and over?
Yeah, well, that's a really good one. I think it's going to be different for every soul, what that is. And they have to make their own judgments about whether it's complete or not. I mean, in the case study I was talking about, the person died and it was obviously incomplete. They weren't able to stand up and resolve it. So they chose to incarnate again. And they could have chosen to incarnate to have a positive life, to get some positive emotions and then reincarnate and perhaps bring in some of those as a positive resource. I certainly know from my between life work that souls often do that as a plan, or they may plan 2 or 3 lives that are much easier and gentler rather than just trying to repeat back what they had before. So it varies an awful lot. I think what completes it is when people are able to go into a similar situation and not get stuck. So for her, that we were talking about, if she got into a relationship with someone, could be in business or it could be in some other aspect of her life, that started to try to control her or abuse her, she would just say, no, I can't accept that, and walk away. And then it's complete. If she ends up getting caught into the same drama, then obviously it's not complete. But I'm sure it would be a lot easier once people have been through a lot of this healing to do it. And it's the same with past lives, even away from the trauma and the body part of things. When sometimes people can just have an insight. One person who was a Jew who hated Arabs just simply went into a past life as an Arab and came back and said, how can I hate Arabs? He didn't need any transformation, just having that single experience cleared it and came about a big shift. So it's always very difficult to know how much healing people need to get that transformation. But at the end of the day, it's a personal one. And this integration of people taking it into their current life in a meaningful way and not being able to repeat the difficulties that they had, then that seems to be the secret. And forgiveness and letting go is so, so powerful. Yeah. I mean, so many of us are holding on to emotions about situations, and it doesn't hurt the person we feel angry about or the person we feel guilty about. It's just ourselves. Right. And sometimes just say, I forgive you, or I forgive myself. I just let that go. And maybe that's all they need, and they can bring about that change. Sometimes it can be what appears to be so simple, but everybody has got their own path. And we're all down here to work with some challenge. And when we've cleared that, another one will pop up. So it's work in progress. Yeah. I think when we've finished all of them, we can just sort of ascend up there somewhere and put our feet up and eat grapes in the spirit realms and look down at everybody down here and say, go on, get on with it, get through life lessons.
Yeah. Mira, if you don't have a pressing question, I just want to know more. You could share more about the in-between lives experiences that you've had, maybe 1 or 2 that are staying in your mind that you want to share with us.
Yeah. Well, all of them are really very, very special. And I think one of them that I recall was a lady from Canada that contacted me a number of years ago and said, could I have a life between life session? I said, well, I'm sure there's lots of local therapists you could go to. And she said, no, I'm going over to the UK. Could I have a session with you? So I thought, well, okay, she's coming to the UK. I'm more than happy to help. And it turned out that her husband had died 4 or 5 months ago, and she was having a lot of trouble getting over it. I mean, the loss of a loved one can be a really difficult emotion and situation to work through. And she was of the view that a between life session would be helpful for her. So I arranged time for her. I took her into the between life, and it turned out that this was the 3rd life that she'd had where she'd lost a loved one. And in the last past life, I mean, because with a between life session, you always start with the last past life, and then explore all the soul memories between that and the current life. And in the last life, she'd been a woman, and her husband had gone off to war and had died, not returned, and she just gave up on life. And the spirit guide was saying, when they reviewed the life, said, well, that's like a suicide. It's like, look, these are the opportunities you had where you could have got on with your life, and showed them meeting people and situations that were coming for her, and she didn't engage in life. And then she went off into a soul group, and in the soul group was a husband from this life, who'd also been the husband from the previous life. And they started to plan their current life and how would they be able to overcome it. And the spirit guide there was to help them in this planning. And the plan they came up with was she'd be a woman again, because they did consider other things. Could she be a man, or could she be younger or older? And they thought, well, I'll be a woman again, but this time I'll be very independent. So her husband agreed that he would die at a younger age, but he wanted to learn patience. So he would have 2 or 3 business opportunities come his way, and her role was to help him be careful, be a bit slower before he took on the new business, so it'd be successful. If he rushed into it, it would be unsuccessful. So he would have his learning of patience with the building. He would help her by dying at a younger age so she could work through it, but they would be very independent. So the fact she would be independent would be more helpful. And then when she went through a final review, which most souls tend to have for fine-tuning from the evolved spirits of light that people encounter between lives, and they had discussions with her about the amount of soul energy bring down. This is quite an interesting one, because the more soul energy souls bring, the easier the life is. It's like they've got a stronger connection with the spirit realms. The less energy that they bring, the harder the situation is. So situations can be graded from extremely hard to much easier. So there was a discussion about the amount of soul energy, and I think the spirits of light were saying, you need to take more soul energy. It's going to be too hard just having that little that you want to have. And they said, the other thing is you need to have, they didn't quite say the word between life experience, but they said you need to have a spiritual experience of understanding about the whole area of the planning that takes place. And this was the session that she felt drawn to. And when she came out of the session, it was, I understand now. I've met him. I know what it's like. So fear of death had gone away. And it didn't take away the tremendous love that she had for him, because these were souls that had been together many, many lives. But she was able to get on with her life in a meaningful way, meet other people, form other relationships, and look after her children. And her children were part of this as well, because they all had things to learn. So, when there's a big life event, often all the souls have all got the part to play. They've all got something to learn. Not every event that people have, but certainly the big ones. So I remember that, because I got this lovely note from her afterwards about how it changed her life so much, almost like therapy. Not that between life sessions are designed to be therapy, they're more to get spiritual insights. But for her, it was so incredibly special.
That's wonderful. Sounds good. Did she mention when she was under any parameters, how we decide? Well, obviously she needed more energy, more soul light, because she had a hard thing to go through. But is there more to it? Did they mention more about that?
No, they just simply said, she said how much soul energy she was going to bring. They suggested a different figure, And in the end, they came up with some sort of agreement. Because at the end of the day, with some souls, they do have the choice. Other souls, they're given a package and they said, oh, that's it. You know, you either take it or you don't.
Oh,
But
interesting.
for more experienced souls like hers, she had more choice about it. It's almost like, you know, as children, when we are younger children, as parents, we tend to say, yep, this is what you do. You're too young to make up your mind. But when they become teenagers, that doesn't work. We have to kind of say, well, we'll give you some advice, but, you know, if you want to go off and go to an all-night party, whatever it is, or drink too much, you know, you might have a headache afterwards, you know. So we kind of give people so it's a little bit like that in the between life. Souls are given quite a lot of free will about engaging in the process.
Nice. Thank you. Interesting.
I find it so fascinating that during the Life Between Life sessions, we get to have a life review, and how we don't need to wait to transition to completely die and never have another chance. And I wonder if that piece with the life review has been helpful to other people.
Yes.
And honestly, as I'm sitting right here, I'm thinking, oh my God, how useful will it be to have a session specifically focused just on that, right? Kind of like the 9th step of the 12-step program. Let's make amends. Let's clean things up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is because they can see the context of what the comments are about. You know, I mean, for example, it could be channeled to someone from a spirit guide, this is what you need to do, or this is your review. But when people experience it for themselves in deep trance and they can feel the energy of the spirits of light they're meeting, that's totally different than just being given pure information. And of course, they can do it in the context of the past life before and how well it had been. So the whole of the between life gives people the context of understanding the advice that they're being given. And often people switch into a much more deeper way of engaging in life after these sort of sessions. And it can be very, very helpful. I mean, as you know, this whole area of switching from a materialistic world to a much deeper, more rewarding, spiritually inspired world is what we're all going through at the moment on the planet. You know, and this work has got such an important part to play in this.
Absolutely.
The other area that does have a big part to play in this is near-death experiences as well.
Right.
Because people in those get a very deep insight. Rena, my wife, has had the opportunity to have a life between life regression, but she also had a near-death experience. I won't say fortunately, because you know near-death experiences are never at the time things that are memorable from the actual, you know, the near-death part, but certainly the spirit realms are part of it, had a lot of similarities to that. And she came away with transformed in terms of her views. So they can be very liberating, as well as the life between life sessions.
Oh gosh, most definitely. Not always a very easy experience, a near-death experience, but always incredibly transformative. I have to ask you, I have this theory that people who have near-death experiences come back with special gifts, not just change perception of reality, but healing abilities, psychic abilities, because the veil has been removed. I wonder if the same happened for her.
She was a lot of the skills that she has in those areas, I think she had before the near-death experience. But certainly, I do know a lot of people do come back with gifts in that area. I think it's very much a personal experience how they do that. But both of them, people are getting glimpses as to what it's like after death. And with both of them, they get a feeling, a connection with the spirit realms, and they just feel the pure love and the freedom of being in that sort of experience. And and it's liberating. So I wouldn't like to think one of them is any more special than the other. They're just different ways. I mean, with life between life work, it's very gentle and people can plan it. With near-death experiences, it just happens whether people are wanting it or not. And occasionally people do have quite a difficult near-death experience. It can be quite unpleasant near-death experiences. So it's not always a pleasant one, where the life between life experiences are always very pleasant, and people get a greater or less set of knowledge depending upon the soul and the how much they're ready to be given.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I wonder if in conclusion, there's anything you would like to bring listeners' attention to, anything you would like to highlight in terms of your work, anything that's on your heart and on your mind.
Yeah. Sometimes the most basic of things tend to be the most important thing. We've been talking about near-death experiences, and we've been talking about life between life, and some of the work that can be done with regression therapy, which are very specialized. But there's an aspect of this big move to the new consciousness that is incredibly important, and that's energy management. Energy management is about understanding we are energy beings, and that our energy field can get affected. It can be affected by energy we pick up from other people. It becomes spirit attachments. And there's various energies that are interfering with this big energy shift that we're going through at the moment. So this whole area of paying attention to our energy field, keeping it clean, is so incredibly important. And that's one of the reasons that I offered as a free gift through the interview, was for some very simple energy management techniques, plus also how to use a pendulum, which is quite useful, because if people aren't familiar with a pendulum, they can do some quick checks. They'll say, is my energy protection sufficient, or do I need to do any more? They can start to do some of the basics of paying attention to their energies. We all pay attention to our physical body and how we dress. We wouldn't think twice about going out without putting the right clothes on, or putting our makeup on if we were the right sex, or whatever, or combing our hair. But energetically, not all of us are giving the same amount of attention to it, and it's just as important. So I put together some tips and some help, which I hopefully get out to as many people as possible that can be of benefit to them.
Thank you so very much for your gifts and for your time, for your wisdom. I'm cutting it short just because my battery is about to go.
Oh,
I wanted to get the goodbye and the thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both. And it's been a delight to meet both of you. And I just like to thank you for all this amazing work that you're doing. I've read your books, and I've seen the way that you're engaging, and particularly in the area of social media. I sometimes wondered, my goodness, I have so much to learn in that area. But it's so important to be able to use whatever tools are around to connect out and to reach people. So blessings to both of you for everything you're doing. And it's a delight to spend time with you both.
Thank you. I cannot thank you enough. Have an enjoyable rest of the day, and thank you again for being with us. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
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 Bye.